Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I'm a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on May 29th, 2022 at approximately 6:55 p.m. PST. Well, it's an odd day, meaning it's an odd-numbered day. And, to be frank, I came back to this world for one primary reason, and that is to remind everyone in existence that working together we can make this a better world for virtually everybody. Now, the reality is this is going to take a lot of work. It has taken centuries, quite literally, for mankind to get into the mess it's in. Okay, and we have to look at the way energy flows. One person changing direction is like one drop of water in a massive river changing direction. It won't have a lot of effect. Now, I'm looking at things here. When I take a look at the energy, at the way your home runs, we have to realize first and foremost that the cerebral cortex of your home is you personally. Now, energy itself, all change, your taught change is frightening. But here's the thing. Every time you say anything, every time you hear anything, and every time you think anything, even on your autonomic systems, everything triggers change. Okay, so unless you are writhing in agony right this moment, then frankly, you're not in pain because of change. It is the ego. Okay, it is that sense of I desire things to be done my way, and people to agree with me. That's what causes the problem, as near as I've been able to piece together. Now, I'm as guilty as the next person in a lot of ways. Okay, so I'm not perfect. I'm just pointing out where the problem is. Okay. Now, to this end, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to make a decision as to whether you are happy with the way your life is right this moment, and I do mean the feeling of your life. Okay. It was pointed out to me. Now, I'm trying to remember. I think it was a North American Indian concept I heard it from. Okay. I do not recall where I heard it, but it boiled down to this. Every person has two dogs. One is evil, or one is angry, one is mad, one is violent. The other is very creative, very loving, very cuddly, very creative. Now, which one of these two is going to win? Is going to survive? Whichever one you feed it, whichever one you feed the most. So this said, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling down, if you're feeling anxious, you're probably feeding that angry dog. You're probably feeding the negative dog. Okay. Now, just paying attention to the positive will not solve the problem for you. We can safely say that from that standpoint, you have to acknowledge the complications in this world. Okay. If you do not acknowledge them, it's very much like sticking your head in the sand and not looking at all. Or, in all fairness, putting your head in a pillow and just curling up in a ball and ignoring the world. Now, it was stated to me one day that the fact that I don't go out and deal with people a lot, okay, and therefore bypass the majority of the mainstream media, that's not living. Okay. Well, here's the thing. Okay, and in some ways that might be the case. In my opinion, though, here's the deal. I don't watch the mainstream media because 90% of what I see whenever I do scan through it talks about who ripped off who stole from who did what to who that was negative. Okay. Or what injustice is being done. But there is very little discussion about positive shifting happening. Okay. Now, I used to think before the social media came out, I used to feel wholeheartedly that, probably like you, the major media and the politicians were the problem. That was until I got onto social media. When social media came out, then I found an intriguing, a really big problem. Okay, now let me put my glasses on here. Okay. I'm just looking. This is on Facebook right now. Whoop. Sure. This is on Facebook right now. So what do? I shut the monitor off. Now, do understand, this is a live recording. Okay. So, being, you know, being a live recording, all the hiccups, all the quirks, all of those become an interesting problem. Now, here's the thing. This is simply what I'm looking at on this is what I am looking at on Facebook right now while I'm on the radio. Now, I see this all the time. Here's a neat little advertisement. The most disastrous looks celebs ever wore on the red carpet. Okay, now, great. These people wore disastrous looks. But why is it people do not post the best looks people ever wore on the market? On the red carpet. Okay. Now, what is this little one? Now, the sad part is there's a lot of this. Okay. And that one, I'm not going to go try and sort that out. But when I just scroll down, okay, you just scroll down, and all what you're looking at is this person, get this. Now, I do see things that are reported properly, that are reported that talk about the positive things. Okay. Now, here's the thing I look at where it comes to people breaking the law. Okay. The reality of it is when you're taking in these things and taking a look at these, now this post I do like. Okay. We will never create enough laws to control evil. Evil does not obey laws. Now, that is all too true. We talk about gun control. We talk about controlling procreation. The reality is, the people that are going to obey the laws are not, the ones that are going to obey the laws. You try registering all the guns anywhere. Okay. You start registering the gun and tell people, you've got to register your guns. The only people that are going to register them are the law-abiding ones that aren't likely to pick them up and shoot people with them in the first place. Okay. If you're up here in Canada and you go, you've got to register the weapons. Okay. Which, don't get me wrong, I am a firm believer, if you've got a gun, if you are going to own a gun, take a safety course. Same applies to a vehicle. If you're going to drive a vehicle, take a safety course on how to drive. Now, here's the thing. When you get people, now hunters are going to they're going to look for your rifles, for a good rifle, a good single shot weapon, because a good hunter only requires a shot. A really good one only requires one. There are some very competent, very honorable hunters out there that will take a shot, not kill the animal, but then because they didn't get it quite right, but they will take the time to track the animal down and put it out of its misery. Now, when you're dealing with guns on the open market, now we know they're on the black market all over the place. Okay, but why are they in public access? Why does anybody except the military, and there's a whole issue there, need semi-automatic and automatic weapons? Unless you're planning on hurting other people. Okay. Animals, if you're hunting, do not fire back. Okay, they just don't. We talk about regulating procreation. Okay, we talk about this whole thing about, people talk about pro-choice, they talk about pro-life, they talk about freedom of choice. Okay, but it is completely inconsistent. Okay, if you're going to have if you're going to be all for, I'm allowed to do what I please. The biggest one that came up was the mask issue, when people were saying, I shouldn't have to wear a mask. It's my choice. And yet many of those same people are telling people you cannot have an abortion. You cannot do that. That is, that's wrong. But what happened to that person's freedom of choice? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a firm believer that abortion is a lousy method of birth control. But there are many times when that is necessary. Okay. Very many, very unfortunate times. The only time that laws actually work is when they apply to everybody. And I mean, like, for instance, when we talk about the driving law in Canada and in the States, you drive on the right-hand side of the road. It does not matter who you work for. It doesn't matter how much money you've got. Okay. You still have to drive on the right-hand side of the road. Now, this is a law that works. Now, this does not mean everybody that gets pulled over, gets treated the same way. That's not the way life works. Okay, but at least they get told, don't do that. Now, yes, people with more money have found ways of paying for things and getting away with things that, frankly, they shouldn't. Okay. But here's, when you start looking at laws, you have to look at the fact that if you're going to change society, it doesn't change by overthrowing a government. It doesn't change by opening fire into a school to let people know there's a problem. There are problems in schools. We know this. But people have to realize those changes have to start here. They've got to start at home. In other words, as I saw posted one day, we're not raising children. We are raising adults. Okay, now I've got 2 kids of my own. Okay, but I'm going to die sooner or later, and they're going to be left to run the world. Okay, your kids, eventually you're going to die, and it doesn't matter how much money you've got. It doesn't matter who you voted for or who you worship. Okay, you're going to end up dying. And if you've got kids, they are going to end up running what's left of the world. The question you have to ask is, are you providing them, or the question I suggest you ask is, are you providing your kids with the tools to make rational choices? Okay, are you teaching them how money works? Are you teaching them how to motivate themselves? Are you teaching them how to make decisions? Okay, we send our kids to school, and at least up here, like I'm in Kelowna, and at least up here, I'm watching kids graduate. They cannot read properly. They cannot write properly. They cannot add properly. Now, these are 3 basic functions for civilization. Okay, if you cannot do these things, what happens if all of a sudden, you've got, I don't have my calculator with me, but I've got one, and this works. Okay, virtually every phone has a calculator. Okay, now that's great, and you can rely on these things, except what happens when the calculator stops? Okay, what happens when it runs out of power? Now, paper works as well, but kids today are not being taught how to calculate on paper. They're just not being taught that. If you don't understand basic math, you are condemning your kids, quite frankly, to a world that doesn't operate properly. Most of the knowledge that is out there, and I'm unfortunately in a very similar position. If my car breaks down, I either have to find somebody that can repair it, or I'm not going to have a car running because I'm completely hooked in it. But my father at least taught me how to find people that can do that. Okay, so you got to take a look in the mirror and go, am I leaving, the idea when you come into this world, when you choose to have children, the idea essentially is to teach those kids how to become functioning members of society. This does not mean automatons. Now, of course, I heard of one person that is talking about a brilliant idea. We don't need humans anymore because we've got robots to do all the work. Well, that's a great idea. I wonder if that person thought about the fact that he's probably human. Okay. And yeah, absolutely. Robots do a lot of work, you know. And I mean, I do find it fascinating myself that computers are now asking people to prove they're not a computer, which is just absolutely brilliant. Okay, but if we remove all the people, granted, you don't need politicians anymore. You don't need first responders. You don't need the military. You got nothing to worry about because the human race will be extinct. Now, as it stands right now, mankind is going down a pattern. Take a look at history. As the saying goes, those that don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Problem is, those that dwell on history have exactly the same problem. Okay, I myself spent years, the better portion of my life in all fairness, telling myself I have a lousy memory for names. Okay, but I found out something really neat. The moment I started telling myself that my memory for names is getting better, suddenly it started to improve. Okay, now it's the same as this. I grew up, literally believing the complete opposite of this sign. I honestly did not feel that I was of any value, that my opinion mattered at all. Okay. Now, that created some massive complications for me. Okay, I believed that my opinion didn't even matter enough to talk to my parents, or to my siblings, or to the people around me. Okay, now what I find is in certain topics, okay, I still get people asking how to straighten their life around. Well, that's what I do for a living. That's what I've been doing since I was 10 years old. Professionally, it's what I've been doing since I was 23, and for the last 22 years. In other words, well, I'm 50, so since I was 37. Okay, it has been my only source of income. Now, the reality is, much as I may not think of much of my own opinion, okay, of the way my life is going, the tools I offer here are the exact same tools that I personally use. The philosophies of life that I live by are literally that I share with you are literally the ones I live by. This is why I say, to me, whether you're a millionaire, whether you're white, brown, black, it doesn't matter. Whether you're gay, whether you're straight, I don't care. I have a problem with logic. Okay, or more to the point, the lack of logic. Okay. Now, the reality is, instead of society as it gets older, as we evolve, and I use the term evolve very loosely, with the advent of the computer, it was supposed to make life a little easier. What it has apparently done is completely fractured society. Because now we have people, and I would love somebody to explain this. Okay. I take a look at it when I look at gender. When I was growing up, there were two genders. You had male, you had female. Okay, that was it. There was no I identify as anything. You were either male or you're female. You may not identify that way. I don't argue that point. But that is not a gender. Okay. And I heard an argument one day, we're not telling that when we're talking male and female, we are not talking gender, we're talking sex. Bad news. When I was growing up, at least, those meant the same thing. I mean, there were other definitions that went with them, but the backbone was the same. Now, I mean, somebody had a t-shirt out, and somebody put a t-shirt out that I saw the other day, right? And it showed this guy, and he was way overweight. Okay, way overweight. Now, to me, of course, I'm 5'8", and when I hit 246 pounds, I felt that I was way overweight. Okay. So the point is this: there was no question he had fat on him. Nothing against him. I got nothing against people that are overweight. Okay. Matter of fact, some of my really good friends, my best friend, in all fairness, well, best friend aside from me, used to be extremely overweight. Our friendship held fine. But this guy was wearing a shirt. He says, and what it says is, I identify as a thin person, therefore I am trans slender. Now, is this suddenly going to become another gender for people? Okay, you know, when you're looking at how you identify, this is not a physiological gender. And this is the thing that is driving major wedges. Okay, this is one of those parts of society that life is fracturing. And if we do not stop this fracture rate, you take the religions, they are fracturing across the board. You take society, and because laws and accepted rules of conduct are not applying to everyone, society is going down a negative spin. Now, do not get me wrong. I am not a doomsayer. Okay, I'm a firm believer that this can be turned around, but it is not going to be turned around unless people start waking up and paying attention. Okay, and I'm not talking about paying attention to me. I'm talking about paying attention to what's going on around you. If you're being taught to fear everything under the sun, if that's all it is, you want to know why you've got depression in massive amounts around the world right now? It's because people are talking about everything going on, everything going wrong. I'm looking at I'm just scanning down here now. I love, what was that? I'm looking at some of these things, that they're being posted, and this is just on Facebook. Okay. We take a look at what's going on, and people are, we have people. Okay, let's get back to the other thing. Okay, and this all boils down to the way the energy in your life is going. This whole thing of the crime rate being, the crime rate, the increase in interest rates. Here's the thing. Okay, we have to realize, yes, there is a cost of living increase. Okay, I'm still trying to figure out why to the degree that it is, but what I do know is, as employers, okay, first and foremost, if you do not raise your staff's wages, okay, you're essentially giving them a pay cut, because all of a sudden they cannot buy as much that they used to. Okay, now that's a great idea. Let's raise the wages. Let's raise the cost. Problem. Okay, you keep doing that, and the cost of living is going to continue rising. Okay, when minimum wage comes up, I'd lay odds that when minimum wage comes up, everybody on it that is at minimum wage, their wage comes up, which is fine. Problem is, if you don't raise your current staff that have a wage above that, if you don't raise their wage a commensurate amount as well. For instance, let's say the wage is deemed to have, your minimum wage has to go up 5%. So you bring it up 5% for everybody at minimum wage. If you don't bring the minimum wage up of the people that are already working for you above minimum wage, if you don't bring theirs up as well, what you're actually doing is saying your service isn't as valuable as this newcomer. So I'm going to cut your wage by a similar amount in order to pay these new people that haven't been here for any length of time. Now, I'm speaking from experience in one aspect. I run my own business. I run it on my own. Okay. But I did the complete opposite of what virtually every company is doing right now. I took my costs. I took the cost of my services and shared it in half. Now, I'm not suggesting you share yours that far. Okay. But what I am saying is that instead of doing that, instead of bringing my prices up again, because I got looking at it going, what I charge for my services takes me outside of the range of the people that really require them. Okay, so I used to charge, up until the 1st of May, I was charging $180 an hour. I dropped my fees to $90 an hour. Now, $90 an hour is still a decent wage, a really good one. Okay, but I got thinking, it's still a pretty big, pretty high price. Okay, so of course that means instead of charging $90 for half an hour, I'm charging 90 for an hour. Okay, which means if I cut it down, because a lot of the calls I get, a lot of the time people run into a problem. All they require is 10, 15 minutes. Okay. Now, in all fairness, if you know somebody that's done something effectively before, okay, that's the person to talk to because that's the one that successfully accomplished it. Now, talking to me about how to fix a car. Okay, I can certainly tell you what feels wrong with it. I remember one day I called somebody over. Okay, I called a friend of mine because my car had troubles. So when he came over, he looked at me. He goes, "Do you know what's wrong with the car?" I says, "Yeah, the alternator shot. Number 8." I says, the alternator shot. The the distributor cap has no connection in line in cable 5, right?" And I said, "While you're at it, the left-hand windshield wiper is out. The motor is out." He goes, "So why am I here?" So I popped the hood and looked at it and went, "What's the alternator?" Right. The point being, can I see things? Certainly. I'm looking at the way the world is going right now. Now, you don't have to believe me. Okay, I'm not asking you to take my word for it. Look at it for yourself. How many people do you know that sit there and they will talk on the computer, they will text each other, but they won't say 2 words to the person beside them? Okay, this is something that you have to deal with. You know, Unfortunately, and we're looking at what I used to know as common sense. I'm just looking at Facebook here, and this is really weird. Somebody took the time to write, "Do not eat coffee with knife and fork. You'll make a mess." Well, yeah, it's a good bet. You know, when we take a look at the reality, if we do not start working together and start communicating once again on equal terms, in other words, I only follow 3 laws. Be true to yourself first. Do unto others as you desire them to do unto you. Energy out, energy in. Okay. We've got to get back to the basics. As far as I can see, if we don't, this society is going to buckle. I don't know when, but it's on a downhill slide. Now, I would love to hear your comments below. Okay, if you've got a question you desire to ask me, drop me a line. If you look below this video, you'll see a whole pile of ways getting a hold of me. Most of the information that I talk about, I have in books. And there's a whole list of the books below this video. Okay, so absolutely get in touch with me. And yes, by the way, just for your edification, do I deal with people? Absolutely. Okay, not as often as I probably could, but I do where it comes to the books, I do take PayPal. Okay, now I'm going to let you go for the day, and I will be back again tomorrow at some point. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and for pity's sakes, stay positive.